And welcome to the second podcast of Constitutional Cappuccino, the wake-up call to the Constitution and the ideals it espouses. My name is Frank Caprio, and I'm going to be your host today. This show's topic is going to be on the Second Amendment. With everything that's been going on for the last few years, the mass shootings, the calls for gun control or gun regulation, I feel it is very important to talk about this subject. Today I'm going to be talking about the history, the original intentions, and what we are seeing today as far as gun control, gun regulations, and how they differ on the original intentions from our founders and why it is dangerous to the American people. But history. First, I'm just going to get out my handy-dandy pocket Constitution here. And I'm going to read the Second Amendment, so we're all on the same page here. A well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Pretty straightforward? So you would think. But everybody sees the controversy over those few words and how they're interpreted. Now this that I'm about to talk about is probably the hardest hitting thing I'm going to talk about all day and will make the biggest difference of everything that I say today. So I'm going to say it up front, and it actually lays the foundation for this whole talk. I'm going to ask a question, and I'm hoping everybody out there will take a second and try to answer it to the best of their ability. What rights do the Second Amendment give you? Now, you know what? Just to make it fair, I'll reread the Second Amendment while you're thinking about it. A well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms, shall not be infringed. All right, now see, if I was like a fancy show, I would have some Jeopardy music going on in the background and all kinds of cool stuff, but I don't. So, hopefully everyone has their answers. And now if you had any answer other than none, then you are wrong. The Second Amendment gives us no right. No rights whatsoever, no right to keep and bear arms. Remember what our country was founded on. Our country was founded on the idea that our Creator was the one who gave us our rights. They are not bestowed by government. They are not bestowed by other men. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, among these life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. To protect these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That was one of our founding principles, and that's important to remember. So when you look at the Second Amendment, you realize that the right to life, the right to keep and bear arms to protect that life, is not a right that's given by government. It is given by your Creator. If you don't believe in God, fine. It's just because you are born a human, you have conscience. You get certain rights. They are yours. They are inalienable. Nobody gives them to you. Nobody can take them away. And that's what the Second Amendment says. So just remember, every time that you're having an argument, or you're having a discussion, about the Second Amendment, that the basis for it is that it gives us no rights. And so, take that accordingly. A lot of the arguments just fall apart because their foundation is built on wet and moving sand. Some other things to remember, too, is that the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments, were not part of the Constitution. This is important because you have to realize why they weren't part of the Constitution. In the Constitutional Convention, they talked about it. Our founders, every state had a Bill of Rights in the state constitution, but they didn't want to include it on the federal level, and there was a reason. Because they didn't want to give the federal government the power to define. And for instance, let's look at the First Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people to peaceably assemble, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Just to let you know, me reading the Bill of Rights, I will take any excuse to read one of these just so more people get exposed to it, because it's important. You can't protect your rights if you don't even know what they are. But anyway, so the reason that they didn't want to have a Bill of Rights in the federal Constitution, because they could define it. So, like, in the First Amendment, we can all agree that the government regulating the press or abridging the freedom of the press is bad. But the question is begged to be asked is what is the press? And that's what we see today. They're redefining words. The press back then was it was a pretty defined term. They knew what it was. People passing on information to whatever. Is it a note between people? Probably not. Um, but you can see where that goes. What is a gun? We let the government define what is a gun or what is an arm. Excuse me. It's the right to keep and bear arms, not guns. So it's what is an arm. So you give them the power to define that, and it could even be good intentions to start with. The government says, look, we don't want to, we know a bomb isn't an arm. So that's fine. We're gonna be able to regulate bombs, but where does arms start? Where does arms end? And that's the reason that it wasn't included. I mean, there's a whole nice story on why it was included with Madison and Jefferson, and all the talking in between the convention time and the ratification time. But that's not what I'm talking about today. I'm talking about the Second Amendment. Something else to realize too, that's a basis in all of this discussion about the Second Amendment, is that it's based on our right to live, our right of life. Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. There's a reason that life is always at the start of that, because life in the hierarchy of things is the thing that you need to protect primarily. If you don't have life, it doesn't matter if you can keep and bear arms. It doesn't matter if you have free speech. It doesn't matter you have the right to peaceably assemble. It doesn't matter you have a right to trial by jury. It doesn't matter that you have habeas corpus. You're dead. It doesn't matter. So that's why life, that's the basis. Nobody can regulate how you protect your life. You can do whatever you need to do to protect your life. As long as you're not infringing on the rights of others, you do what you need to do. And that's a basis for our Constitution and our way of life here in the United States, which is under attack. I think I pretty much got everything out. One last thing I will say, though, is that just having the Second Amendment in there and then realizing the importance of this, realize that they didn't have what we know of since they've passed away to rely on. They didn't know about the Chinese regime where tens of millions were killed by their own government after being disarmed. They didn't know about the Russia, where 20 plus million were killed by their own government after they were disarmed. They were going by history back in 1789, and they had already seen it enough at that point, realizing what kings and monarchs and tyrants and other cabals of evil people who were ruling over others have done, to realize that it was very important to keep and bear arms. If they would have seen the things that we've seen today, they would have written it a lot more stringently. The Committee of Style in the Constitutional Convention has to be one of the biggest things to be berated. Some of the things they did to the actual wording of the Constitution to make it more streamlined really, really screwed things up. But anyway, that's the end of the history, and I'm going to go into original intentions now. Original intentions is really easy when it comes to the Second Amendment. This was to ensure that the populace would remain armed. An armed populace, it's a safe country. The founders, as I spoke before, the founders had already seen enough evidence in history to realize that tyrannical governments were the number one cause of the loss of liberty of people. And so they wanted to protect against that. And that's why the Second Amendment is there. And not just federal government. You're talking about, state governments, county, city, wherever there is tyranny, whenever somebody is trying to oppress somebody else, the presence of guns in law-abiding citizens' hands sways the day. It makes it a lot better situation. Disarmed populaces, and again, we can go back through history and see what happens when governments disarm populaces. Their will is done and millions die. So we definitely don't want that to happen. But remember, it's all on the basis of your right to life. That's an inalienable right. And I'm going to say that a lot, inalienable. Until people understand what that word means, I guess I'm going to say it. But you have the right to life. Realize that our government thinks that they don't have to protect your life. That's not what they're tasked with. The Supreme Court has had a couple different rulings, and it's supported at every level that that law enforcement is not responsible for your life. And if they're upholding the law, and you happen to die when they're doing it, then they're not responsible. There is a case, I believe it's the Queen Hill riots. But anyway, there was a Supreme Court ruling that said that the police there were people within a cordoned off area that could not get police help. They would call, the police would not respond because they weren't going in. They had sealed off the area to keep this violence from spilling out of that area, but they were not responding to calls inside the area, and people died because of police not going in there. And so the Supreme Court ruled that, hey, you can't hold police responsible for it. They were upholding the law. Upholding the law at that point, with the size of, that type of violence, was containing it. That was what upholding the law was. So they weren't held accountable. Now, let me tell you too, before anybody takes this the wrong way, police and law enforcement, all first responders, they demand our utmost respect. They run to places that everybody else is running away from. They go places that, like I said, if nobody else in their right mind would want to be there, but these people are there to help others. So, kudos to them. They deserve all support. But realize they take orders like everybody else. Those good policemen who may have wanted to go into the Pulse Club before the 3 hours, the 3 hour window was up or whatever, they can't do that. It's against the rules. And that's because the people who are ruling us right now, I won't even say government, who are ruling us, are telling us that that's not a priority. When in actuality, again, governments are instituted to protect these rights, the rights of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And if they can't do that, then, maybe it's time to, thinking about changing some stuff up. That's exactly what this podcast is about. Now we're going to go to probably the funnest section, and that's what we're seeing today and how it differs with reality and intentions and common sense and a prosperous and free future for America. Okay, and just to correct something that I had just talked about, that's the Crown Hill riots that I was referring to. Not what I said before. But anyway, what we're seeing today in the Second Amendment. First of all, none of the arguments are really pertinent to what the Second Amendment is about, as I've just discussed in the, for the last 10 or 15 minutes. The Second Amendment is there for a reason. Second Amendment gives us no rights. It merely details rights that are inherent to us, that aren't given by men or government, on what they should not be infringed on. So, most of the arguments are bogus. What is an assault weapon? Should people have assault weapons? Blah, blah, blah. We've already given ground on the Second Amendment. You have to jump through hoops like nobody's business to get a fully automatic weapon. Honestly, I would love to be able to. The bad guys seem to be able to get them when they want, but the law-abiding citizens can't, because it's just an onerous task to do it. I would definitely say that's somewhere along the line of, infringement. Just realize there is one way that you can get, there's a couple ways you can get a fully automatic weapon. I think it's a Class 3 license that you need to get. But one of the ways is real simple, and that's if the sheriff of your county signs off a little piece of paper, you can own a Class 3 weapon. You can buy them, and I think it may only be for your county because that's where he's a law enforcement officer of, but hell, I only live in my county, so, I don't really need to be transporting my, whatever, my little Uzi or whatever. I won't be transporting across county lines. I'll just keep it here for my own self-protection. And I think it'd be really cool to have a fully automatic weapon just in case the crap ever hits the fan. And you really need it. Again, kind of like that parachute analogy. You know what? I've owned regular guns for 2 decades plus. Haven't had to shoot anybody yet. Hope to never have to shoot anybody. But in case there is that one day that somebody wants to hurt me and I need to shoot them, I want to be able to do it. I want to do it as efficiently as possible. So just don't tell me what to carry. I'm not telling everyone they have to get armed either. If you don't want a gun, fine, don't get a gun. I'm not going to make you. But if I want to get a gun, don't step in my way for getting it. One of the things that has definitely changed though, in the last 200 plus years, is that this thought that human nature has changed, that somehow we're better people, and that we don't need guns because, we're a much more civilized society. Yeah, right, whatever. people still have the same motivations that they did 200 years ago, they had 2,000 years ago. Some people are good people, some people are bad. Some people will steal from you. Some people would never steal, they want to help you out. Some people are liars, some people tell the truth. Some people just want to live their own lives, other people want to rule over others. Nothing has changed. Nothing has changed about human nature. The trappings have gotten better, and people are so they are so disingenuous when they, look at our shows. Look at Star Trek. Okay, so they got phasers, but what do they do with those phasers? The same thing we do with guns. They shoot bad people trying to take their stuff or trying to hurt them or trying to do bad things. The same thing we do here. And guess what? The bad guys, they got phasers too, or they got photon rifles or whatever they're carrying. But it's just, so even in the future, we show a future of people acting the same way we're acting here. Now, they dress it up and make it look all fancy but when it comes to reality, human nature doesn't change. So what was written 200 plus years ago is every bit as relevant today as it was back then. So don't take that argument that we don't need it, that we're much worse. Whatever. That's just read the papers and you can see that one of the problems is that where we had I think it's always been a very small percentage of the population that's really hardcore criminals. The problem now is that we have so many freaking people on the planet. That small percentage actually represents a lot of people now. Before that small percentage, it just represented a few hundred people here and there, and it was easier to control. Now, with the advent of travel and all that, or linked communications, criminals don't even have to actually be, classic criminals. They can do stuff online and stuff. So, the whole gun thing is irrelevant at that point. But anyway, I'm getting off the subject here. And so don't take that whole human nature thing. We don't need guns. Civilized countries don't have guns. Well, no. Switzerland, I've been to Switzerland. I've been to a few European countries. Switzerland was my absolute favorite. It was freaking like Disney. They kept it so damn clean. It was just awesome. So, and they have like one of the highest per capita gun ownerships in the world and very low crime, and it's a very nice place to visit. I would definitely suggest sometime in your life, putting that on your bucket list and going to Switzerland. So don't take that whole crappy argument that it's civilized and, whatever. Another argument that I'm hearing is that guns are too powerful. That somehow that me shooting a bullet faster is going to make me more dangerous to society. No, it's going to make me more dangerous to somebody who's trying to do me bodily harm or trying to harm others that I love. It has nothing to do with the rest of society. Like I said, I've been a gun owner for decades, and I haven't had to shoot anybody yet. I'm going to keep it that way. I'm going to tell you a little story, and this is going to lead me to another point, is that there is one time that I actually did kind of use a gun. I used to work late. I think I was working at Charlie's Steakhouse at the time. I was a student over at USF. I'm living in some apartments. And at 7 o'clock in the morning, somebody is pounding on my door. And I say pounding, man, they're flexing the door so it's moving inches. And I had gone to bed like 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. So let's just say this isn't the most pleasant wake-up call. And they are screaming, too. They're yelling and pounding on this door, so my dogs are going wild. I get up, I grab my 45, go to my underwear, open up the door, and stick my head like around the door with my hand hanging straight down on my gun and say, "Can I help you?" Let's just say this guy got polite, and he got polite really quick. He says, "Oh my God, I must be at the..." He was drunk. It looked like he had been frickin' snorting coke and shooting heroin all night. Just the eyes, the sunken face, the whole bit, sweating. Just looking awful. As a heroin and cocaine binge will make one look. But like I said, when he saw the gun and he saw me there, I didn't have a nice look on my face. It wasn't a happy greeting. He straightened up immediately, said, "I must have the wrong apartment," and he shut up and he got the F out of the building. And that brings me to the point is that we hear about all the bad stuff that goes on with guns. We hear a massacre at Pulse. It is a tragedy. It is horrible. But that's exactly what it is. It's a tragedy. It isn't a normal event. What is a normal event is thousands of people every day who successfully defend themselves with guns who you don't hear about. that, like me, or other people that have, and there are some reports of them, don't get me wrong, but that's not what we talk about. Somebody pulls out a gun and the robber goes, oh, no, 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 no. Or, remember, here in the state of Florida, we're only one of 5 states that doesn't have open carry. Do you think this guy would have, and Pulse would have been so happy to be going in there, lugging all that freaking ammunition and stuff, or however he got it in there, if there were people walking around with guns on their hips? Probably not. I mean, that tends to deter violence when people realize that other people have guns. Criminals want an easy target. I mean, they're not like the people you see on TV who are just going to, no, they want an easy target. You show them a little bit of fight, and they're going to go run the other way. And honestly, in today's society, I mean, as a gun owner, I'm not going to go report to the police that I just fended off somebody with my gun. They may start asking questions and want to see the gun and I mean, I don't know. Like I said, I like police, but at that point, there's no reason I would involve them in it. The situation is taken care of. The guy went running the other way. Now, if I felt he was a threat, if he was coming after me and I didn't eliminate that threat, for sure I go to the police. But on a random encounter like that on a street or something, somebody comes up to me and I defend myself, I clock him upside the head or knock him out, I'm not going to go to the police, because then I could there's too many instances where I see people doing what's right getting charged with crime, and, just screw that. You just do what you need to do and just go walk the other way. Anyway, that's my rant on that. And now, another thing too, and that we see it every time there's a mass shooting, is that the same reaction: let's regulate guns. Used to be to just outright ban them, and there's still some people who call for banning, but now it's the call is for regulation. And what is regulation? Regulation is just a mild form of a gun ban. You just say certain people, for whatever reasons that's determined, that we can say they can't have guns. And then we can go in later and we can broaden those definitions. Before you know it, you do have bans. I mean, we're seeing the flight lists. The terrorist flight lists. They want to say that if your name's on a terrorist flight list, you can't purchase a weapon. You cannot exercise your constitutionally protected right to keep and bear arms because somebody somewhere along the line put your name on a list. No due process, no adjudication. You're just on a list, so you lose your rights. That is so blatantly against what everything America stands for. It is just ridiculous to think that somebody, oh no, nobody today, because human nature is so good. Remember, nobody today would ever think of using their political power to harm another, or to give their political opponents, some cause for alarm, or make it harder for them to do what they do. No, that would never happen anymore because we're so much more advanced humans. Obviously, I'm hoping that you know that I'm trying to put some sarcasm into that voice. Sometimes it's hard when you get so fed up with the BS that's going around, but that was sarcasm. Obviously, that goes on, and that goes on a regular basis. Look at the IRS targeting of all the conservative, the Tea Party groups and all the conservative groups just to hush them up around an election time. That's not what our government's here for. And if anybody agrees with that, even if you agree with that just because the ends justify the means, then you're an idiot, because realize that once you put those mechanisms in place, you who support it today may be the target of them later. So, don't be so quick to be throwing around the power of the government to be suppressing other people, because it's going to come back and, slap you in the back of the head. That's exactly what karma does. So anyway, that's pretty much all of it. I hit most of the topics that I wanted to hit. I talked about most of the things I wanted to talk about. I didn't finish the thought on the firepower of guns. You know what? When I go to a gunfight, I don't really know exactly how much firepower I want to bring. So if I have a little extra, that's not going to hurt my cause. That may even make things easier. If I have to shoot somebody through a door and you'll have a 7.62, instead of my AR-15, I think I had an M60 in the Army. It was a fully automatic 7.62, man. That thing was freaking just straight up awesome sauce. But anyway, I mean, that was like the movies in real life. I mean, you could do stuff like, oh my God, I just made that whole piece of wood, just that whole thing that I wasn't supposed to shoot with this just disappear. But anyway, so I don't want people telling me, that's one of the arguments. Well, why do you need this? Because I want to make sure that I live in a firefight, and if I bring a little bit of extra firepower, then so what? Oh, you know what? Last thing. This will be the absolute last thing, I promise, and then I'm going to sign off on this podcast. And that's, well, the bad guys are going to get their hands on weapons. So what are we going to do? We're going to regulate. We're going to pass more laws. Newsflash. Criminals are called criminals because they don't follow the law. So any laws that you pass are not going to affect criminals. So all you're doing is reducing the pool of people that are carrying guns that can protect themselves and fulfill their duties as Americans. And that's basically it. So you have a great day. Hopefully this podcast has been good for you. If I post this anywhere, you want to leave some remarks, I definitely take some criticism. And, it's constructive and otherwise. So good talking with you. This is Frank Caprio signing out. Constitutional Cappuccino, the wake-up call to the Constitution and the ideals it espouses. You know what? I'll leave with a quote. One quote that's sticking with me right now after going all this stuff is that free men are not free, or excuse me, let me start all over. Freedom is not free, free men are not equal, and equal men are not free.